Hi, Facebook family. We see you guys. We'll be starting in 2 minutes. What is this? Hey, Rhonda. And Darren. Hi. Hey. Closer to mommy. You already did it.
We taking calls? No,
I didn't get it set up. I was gonna set it right now.
don't worry.
Yeah, if they have a question on there, I could just.
Okay.
Device charging slowly, for faster charging, use the chargers that came with your phone. Make sure the cable isn't damaged.
You change chargers.
That's new.
Okay?
Yeah, I really don't necessarily need that charger, but it's fine. Hello, Instagram, YouTube. We're getting started in about 60 seconds. Mhm.
We're now live. Three, two.
Welcome to another edition of the Empower Hour. I am Al Kumar.
And I'm Hanifa.
And we're your hosts each and every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. where we come to you with impactful topics of discussion that affect our everyday lives. Of course, this session will be no different. In the studio we have with us is no stranger to most of you guys who watch us all the time because Imhotep is a frequent guest of ours here on the Empower Hour. Imhotep Fatiou is with us again.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back.
Appreciate you always. You're here to talk to us today about Are We Africans? Which should be an interesting discussion. And family, we need your help out there in this discussion. So we're not taking calls today. However, if you're on your social media sites, type in, especially on Facebook.
Yeah.
Hanifa has the Facebook stream right here in front of her. So whatever your questions or comments you have, she can see in front and center. Imhotep,
Yes.
for those who may not know who you are, although they should. The founder, lead organizer of Pan African Maryland. Did you want to add to that a little bit?
That's sufficient. I started PLM and now it has grown. And one of our principal focus is African sovereignty. And we feel we can do that best by reconnecting us to our indigenous ways. We tend to say Njia Yetu, which means our way. Because when you hear our way, that implies that there's another way. So we want to create that distinction to show what is ours and what is theirs. And by there, we mean any foreign element.
Okay. And family, just a sidebar note, if you hear babies in the background, that's because we're a village over here. And we have a lot of little ones that just joined the village recently. And moms are in the studio. Hanifa's a new mom. Our wonderful engineer, Chris Murray, she's a new mom. And so we don't kind of separate the two around here. So
The volume
you
is
may
all the
hear
way
some,
up.
you may hear some noises in
Someone
the
was saying the
background.
volume.
The volume is
But it's all the way up. Maybe because we're a
Oh.
little further back. Where's your microphone thing? Because we're a little further back.
I forgot that.
It's all right.
Yeah, I forgot my mic.
The mics are on.
Yeah. Now, if you want to hear us, if you can't hear us as well as you'd like, we're streaming on the main base, which is on Facebook as well under eLife Media Group. eLife Media Group. If you go to that page, you'll see us live. You'll see the. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Did you check the volume?
Yeah, it's all the way up.
Okay.
That's the first thing I wish I did.
You want to get started with us, or you want me to go ahead?
Well,
shoot
welcome.
Welcome.
It's always a pleasure to have you. So today we're talking about are we African? And I know for some of us it's like, what kind of question is that? For some people watching, but if you're paying attention, it kind of has been a topic of debate of late. A little bit controversial depending on who you're talking to. And so I wanted you to start off asking like, okay, not are we African? And if we are, what exactly is African? What does that mean? Sorry, I got straight to the point.
No, I appreciate it. So when, a little bit of backdrop.
Mhm.
Usually topics like this, I wouldn't even engage in it.
Mhm.
I believe to engage in such a topic is to validate the argument.
Okay.
I believe it's an invalid argument from its inception.
Mhm.
So I decided to come on this show because of YouTube. So I said I would come on and I had a conversation. So I can only answer this question from an African point of view because I'm an African. I'm not necessarily concerned with the confused amongst us that's trying to figure out who they are. I'm not necessarily concerned with those who are trying to hold on to ideological, outdated, molded theories and philosophies. We have no time for that. We are at war. I bought several books today, but there are many books. But one of the principal books is Dr. Chika Najat, African Origin of Civilization, Myth or Reality. And then you have one of his greatest works, which is Civilization of Barbarism, which is also Dr. Chika Najat. So anyone that really want to find out who we are, you read the works. So what I would say is this: I am an African. My sisters and my brothers, such as yourself, you are an African. We are descendants from that continent, the big continent, the minimal rich continent in the world. That's where we descend from. Only a fool would throw that continent away and try to claim the United States of America that has no mineral resources. So if we keep on saying who we are not, we're going to lose the greatest place in the world. So we are Africans, without a doubt. That's who we are.
You know, I'm glad you bought those books, because what I find in my own personal journey through this life, I find that those who really do the study themselves tend to be the ones who are like yourself, who are concrete and firm as to who they are.
Yes.
Those who normally don't and maybe take on the ideologies of other people or messages what other people are putting out, and they grab hold of those messages and claim them as their own without doing the proper study and research for themselves, tend to be the ones who I find don't have the type of stance that you do.
Yes.
So I find that interesting. So thank you so much for bringing those books.
Can I add this?
Okay, go ahead.
In my travels within the United States of America and traveling through different schools of thought in terms of study, because I studied quite a few things. I studied in the Moore Science Temple, I studied in the 5% Nation, I studied in Nation of Islam. I was raised in a household as a Jehovah's Witness with a mother. I even went into the Christianity for a time period. And then I began to, in my search to rediscover and uncover who I am, I began to search through Africa. But what I realized is this: through all those schools of thought, I realized that you have a certain types of people. You have people who repeat what they hear, right? Then you have people who will investigate what they hear. And then you have those who search for what they need to know. See, I started off at the top, repeating what I heard. Then I began to investigate what I heard. So now I'm to the point now I search for what I need to know. And that's the process of self-development, self-discovery, and being grounded. And it's about being clear. See, what's happening to African people today is that we are contending with this chronic, massive confusion. And we have to try to figure out how to clarify the confusion that's suffocating our people.
So the latter part of my question was, well, now that we're clear on we are Africans, what does that mean? Because you often hear black people say, well, we're not a monolith, and I know what that means. But I mean, is there like some sort of I don't even want to say a blueprint, perhaps maybe a blueprint for what being African is?
Great question. Look at it like this right here. The blueprint is your ancestors.
Okay.
Europeans do as their ancestors did. It's not a single thing that a European is doing today that their ancestors didn't do. So to be African is understand your ancestors. You do as your ancestors did. Principally, our ancestors built civilizations. They built communities. They reared children. They married. They built families. They built institutions. This is what we should be doing. Now, considering the fact that we know that there are wars being waged upon us, and we know we have a homeland, a motherland, then it's principally our responsibility to be a part of that war on some level, to fight for the reconstitution and the re-civilizing of that land. What I mean by re-civilizing is to expel the foreign elements. If those foreign elements look like you or not, they need to go as well. But we need to purify that land by getting out all the things that are foreign and toxic that's destroying our motherland. So for me, and I've been to Africa twice, and I'm going back again this year. So when I go to Africa and I talk to African people, they always are concerned with what we are doing because they understand that it's work to be done. And so when we look out into the world, we say, what does it mean to be African? It means to be as your ancestors were, because you are in fact your ancestors. See, in the African scheme of things, we are never dying to the point that we are gone. We are reborn within ourselves. So we are always ancestors returning back to this realm to what? To redo and reinvent and innovate and create on the ways of our ancestors. So think about it. What did Shaka Zulu do? Shaka Zulu built the nation. Why? Because he understood that you had these foreign invaders coming. What did they do in ancient Kemet? They built an empire. What did they do in ancient Nubia? They built an empire. When you look at Mao, they were gone. They built empires. So we know what we're supposed to be doing. We have to build. That's the work. That's the business of African people. And within the building this time, we got to think about how we're going to secure what we build. So part of building these institutions, we have to build a military force to protect who we are.
My question is, I have so many questions. Okay, for those who will hear you and will say things like, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
I love it.
Who hear you and say things like, oh, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not African. So with that person, and when they say that, then who are they then? If they look like you and me and have the same experience as you and me, who are they if they're not African?
That's a great question. So for me, I would further conversate with that individual to understand where they're coming from. Because some of us are sincere in our ignorance. We're not necessarily being a butthead. Some of us just don't know. And because we don't know, we're going to speak from that premise of not knowing.
Yeah.
So I would have a further conversation to see who this individual is in terms of his or her position. If I can determine that his or her ignorance is sincere, then I would aid in a development of awareness. If I determine that the ignorance is just something that's ingrained stupidity, you know what I'm saying, then I'll let you just drift off and die off. Because that's what you deserve to do. You deserve to drift and die. So right now, I'm 48. I don't have time to misuse my time with individuals who want to hold on to something that's outdated and disproved. Case in point, you have this book right here, this research right here by this sister, Dr. Lisa Ombre. Right? She done research in the Cameroons. She traced herself back to the Cameroons, and she's been doing research in the Cameroons. She have documented 200 ships that left the Cameroons with captive Africans on it for the Americas. Most of them was dropped off in Grenada. And this is factual research that she has demonstrated and documented. Then you have another one. This is another book that's written by a sister, Slaves at Sea. This book documents ships picking our people up from the west coast of Africa and taking them across the Atlantic. It documents that. And then you have David Imhotep's book that speaks about us before any type of invasions, 50,000 years ago, how we came to this land. So we have the research now. We don't have to hold on to outdated, outmoded theories. We have the Black African people who have done the research, who have demonstrated through documentation, first-hand documentation, as to who we are and where we descend from. If we continuously to deny Africa, we're going to harm ourselves.
Yeah.
Why is it important? Why is this important? Why is this significant? I mean, we're in 2019, Baba Imhotep, right? Why would we just, why can't we just evolve into whatever we want to be? Why does this hold any significance?
It holds significance because, in the first place, it's hard to be the best of who you are if you're not grounded as to who you truly are. You can't materialize the true essence without understanding what that essence is. And there is an impossibility to identify with the essence of who you are, absence of the culture of who you are. So you have to understand that culture, and to understand that culture is to be able to situate yourself historically within a culture, because the culture becomes the womb, it becomes the matrix. The culture and the history are entwined, but the culture births the history. right? So we have to be able to journey through the history to situate ourselves in a culture to better understand who we are and what our responsibilities are as people of a distinct group of people, that gave birth to everything else in the world. Right? We are those individuals. Whether we say West Africa, South, Central, Northeast, or North, that's us. That's who we are.
So I'm going back to devil's advocate because I want to quell all the noise. I really want to hone in on all of the nuances of thoughts that are out there that people talk about and that aren't really addressed in this manner. Like, for instance, Africans don't like us. They don't like us. I'm not, why do you want to call yourself African? They don't even like you. What would be your reply to that?
Well, my first reply would be this. Like I said, some of us repeat what we hear, some investigate what we hear, and some of us search for what we need to know. Right? If you read the history of Africa in terms of the liberation struggles, there's not a single African freedom fighter that didn't come to the United States of America to talk to us. Not a single one that didn't embrace us. Not a single one. Whether it's Thomas Nkoa, Sekou Touré, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba. There's not a single Winnie Mandela. Not a single one on the house. All of them came here, right? So if the leaders, the ones who pushed forth the African explosion starting in 1957, 58 with Ghana, if those individuals were able to come back and reconnect with us and talk to us and tell us how they know who we are them, and we need to be working together, then for us to believe and listen to what these other fools are saying doesn't make any sense. I didn't receive any negative remarks from anybody when I was in Ghana. Now, is that to say that everybody in Africa are clear? No, because we have been ravaged throughout the world. So you are going to meet some instances where individuals are going to say some things that doesn't make any sense. The same way we're going to say some things in the USA that doesn't make any sense. That's going to happen, right? But the minority who spews his or her venom does not speak for the majority of who we are.
Right.
And it does not represent the majority. So
same on the African side.
Same on our side. So to truly get a feel for who we are as a people, you have to search for what you want to know. It's simple as that. Search for what you want to know and for what you need to know. And we each need to know our relation one to the other. And once we come to understand that, then we can be better.
Thank you.
Okay, so how does this African thing work? What about the people here who, because this is the argument you're hearing, my ancestors weren't slaves, they were always here.
Right.
Okay. My ancestors were slaves, they were always here. Does that really matter? Because today we're talking about the struggle of black people.
Yeah. So this is what's happening. That's the reason why I bought this particular book. Because this book speaks about African people that predates the European invasions of Africa. So we know the European invasion of Africa starts pretty much in the 1400s. The West Africa in the 1400s. So African people left Africa tens of thousands of years ago and went all over the world for the most part. That's what it did. So we're not denying that there's not an element of African people who were on these shores prior to.
I'm sorry.
Mommy Dewey.
Go ahead, I'm so sorry.
So we're not denying that there were not an element of Africans on these shores prior to the European implementation of chattel enslavement. We're not saying it. We're not denying that.
Right.
We know that exists. But what's happening is that we are trying to deny an experience that did occur in the process.
Right.
So we can't deny that, right?
Right.
And the reason we're trying to deny an experience that occurred is because we don't understand that experience. So we're looking at this quote-unquote thing that we call enslavement or slavery or chattel slavery. We're looking at it from the bad point of view. We're thinking that, oh man, my ancestors went for this, that, and other. That's because we don't know what truly took place. We don't know how our ancestors fought the entire time in this land was a fight. So since some of us don't want to identify with a time period that they think that our ancestors just totally took advantage of, they're trying to do away with that and just focusing more on saying that we were always here. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, a small element of us was here.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But a great majority of us was also brought here, you know what I'm saying, through war invasion and captivity. We have to embrace both sides. That's what's taking place.
Okay, I have a friend, baby guys. He is not cooperating. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to step off.
Okay. Does DNA settle this claim? I mean, I see you have all types of evidence right there in front of us. Historic relevancy. But what about the DNA?
Well, the DNA, most of these, like, and David Imhotep, he used a lot of DNA in his research to show the connection between Africans on this side of the world and Africans in West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So you use that. Dr. Cheikh Najat, he uses a lot of science in his findings as well. So DNA, it plays a part because through the DNA, we can begin to trace some elements back to the continent of Africa.
Right.
So we can't discount it. So we're using all elements of science to show and prove who we are. So DNA is great for those who want to use DNA because you have some valid DNA systems out there that have done it. In case in point, with Dr. Lisa Ambry, she used DNA in her research as well to trace herself back to the Cameroons. And so that's why she began to do all the research there. And I would like to add, and through her research, she actually discovered this place called Bimbia in Cameroon that most of the Cameroonians had no knowledge of. And it was a major port where they would bring captured Africans, prep them and get them ready to board these ships and sent off across the Atlantic. And this was all through her research, and this is great research that she just recently uncovered. So we know that who we are, if we're willing to, like I say, be open for knowing who we are, and if we're willing to search for what we need to know, and stop just going on these outdated, outmoded theories and philosophies of individuals who do not want to claim who we are.
Why do you think that is though?
Because to free people, to tell people, to help people to come into a knowledge of themselves, sometimes it causes you to lose your own power. So if my power is that I'm making you think that I got all the answers and I know everything, then I'm not going to help you find the total truth, right? Because you find the total truth, then you no longer need to rely totally upon me. And people who are very insecure, they're like that. Like whereas with me, I don't have those type of insecurities. I will reveal to you whatever you need, whatever you want to know. I'm going to tell it to you. Now you may not like it because it may disrupt something else on the inside of you, but I'm going to tell you all the truth as I come to understand it as it relates to African people. A lot of people are not like that. So a lot of these outdated theories, they are held on to by people, principally men of African descent that are insecure and egotistical. These individuals keep these theories, these philosophies, these outdated molded things in existence to maintain a type of messianic appeal to people.
Wow, never even considered it that way.
I have a question, the one behind camera. What about people who are mixed? Now, could they be considered African as well, or does it depend on who they identify with, or they just both? Because I'm of the mind, the whole biracial thing, like I'm like the one drop rule is really what I'm getting at, right? I'm not one that subscribes to it. I feel like this person's just mixed. I don't see them as black and I don't see them as white. But what about those individuals? Like what are we saying? Are we saying that they're African?
Now that's a great question, because part of in the era time we're living in, because of the disruption of the history. And let me back up for a minute.
Okay.
So let's talk about history first and foremost. Try to make some clarity here. So history is everywhere and always that which a people create by the exertion of their own will on a particular environment. So people create their own history. And so the European intrusion into African history and the implementation of chattel enslavement, that is not African history. The experience did occur. I'm not saying the experience didn't happen. I'm not saying chattel slavery didn't occur. I am saying that's not African history, right? We didn't create that. We were just the recipients of the brunt of that intrusion. Now, so when you get to your question, it comes down to how we're going to define ourselves, because as a result of that intrusion, our history was disrupted and it was derailed. And because of the derailment, now as we are beginning to come back onto rail, we're in a different era of time now. So we have to redefine things for ourselves now. So for us, Africa is more than biology and it's more than anatomy. It also encompasses consciousness as well, mentality and mindset. and spiritual understanding for us. So it's not enough to just to say because you have this melanin or pigmentation of the
Right.
skin that is sufficient enough, right? It's also how you identify and what you do with that identification. So the identification has to become something that's behavioral. So if it doesn't manifest in the behavior, then we can counsel you out. Because like I said, we are in a worldwide war and all Africans have to be on deck. If you're not on deck, you just forfeited right to be Africa. Everybody has to be on deck. There's no I'm gonna stand on the sideline until y'all get Africa up and running and then I'm gonna come back in some African. It doesn't work that way. You gotta be on deck right now in the midst of this war as it's being waged against us as a people.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you can find the blackest melanin enriched person with locks in their hair and waving the African flag, but that doesn't necessarily mean they African.
Doesn't make them African. They can be dark as midnight, and they can have locks thick as Bob Marley, but they can be as European as Cecil Rose.
Jesus. Okay. You brought up, I have a quote here from Marcus Garvey that you pretty much said in your own words, where he said, the brilliant Marcus Garvey, I will not give up a continent in exchange for an island.
Simple as that.
That's so wise to me. And I think he was so able to see so much further than the average. So for me, I find a lot of times we take on material, the material wealth and forget about, it's like surface dwelling, forget about where these material things originate from.
Yes.
Like for instance, like factories. And I think we need to build our own factories and things like that. So okay, so what we're creating in the factory, where do these minerals originate from?
That's right.
Or like for instance, technology.
That's right.
Okay, well if we need to be more advanced ourselves in technology and computers and cell phones and things, the things that make these things run, where does those minerals things come from?
Raw material.
Right. So we want to give up the value of the land that is what makes everything else wealthy and everybody else wealthy in the world. The Chinese aren't there. They're no fools. They're not rushing to Africa just because.
That's right.
So for me, it's like we don't see the vision. We want to hold on to something like a place called America without understanding that America could never be without Africa.
That's right. And it has a lot to do with, and I was having this conversation, I've been having it lately. What I come to realize is a part of this thing we call Sankofa, which I believe the word is thrown around loosely lately, and the terminology re-Africanization, I think, it's also has been thrown around loosely without in-depth understanding.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a change of values. See, a lot of us come to like the aesthetics of African culture without changing the values that we currently have. And so it's the value system that we are carrying around inside of us that's dictating those types of actions. Because our value system is that the European have created the ideal standard. We believe it to be the ideal standard.
Yeah.
So we measure everything against that. So we think that the United States is the greatest place in the world. We think that, and we're basing that solely on materialistic things, how it manifests, right? The U.S. has very limited amounts of mineral resources.
Yes.
That's the reason why they steal from everybody in the world.
Good teacher.
Nothing is here, right? So for us to give up Africa for this place, it's a foolish move. There's nothing strategic about that, and there's nothing tactical about that. It's a fool's play, right? We must fight tooth and nail forever for Africa. And whoever don't want to be a part of that fight, we must associate instantly as an enemy until you prove otherwise. If you're not on the path to redeem, to restore, and resurrect Africa and African people, the African mind, the African way, then you are an enemy to African people.
Ashe.
I'm coming with a question.
Okay.
Are we talking repatriation here?
But see, that's a great question. Like I said earlier on, I think that since they have intruded into our history and there's been a derailment, there is not going to be a mass repatriation. That's not going to happen, right? So we gotta acknowledge that because we have multiplied throughout the world and we have what we need is we need a home base, right? We need a home base that's unified, that we are part of, that if we choose to go back and forth, we choose to go back and forth. Now, I do believe that some of us should go back and things of that nature and build and make residencies there, things of that nature. But I don't believe that, let's just say in the USA alone, like the 50 million of us in the USA, we're not even talking about the 50 million that's down in Brazil. That's 100 million of us. We're not going to do a mass. That's not happening. That's just from the US and Brazil alone. We're not even counting anywhere else, right? So we got to look at it in a different context. Rather than saying that, we got to we have to make it where as though people's entry into and out of is easy. We can go across the land without the barriers and stuff like that. So that got to be the fight. We got to be like a unified Africa that also includes the diaspora. So you got to think about how do we create a unified Africa that includes the diaspora within the unification, that acknowledges the diaspora people as citizens of this unified thing we call Africa.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we have.
And I'm seeing moves in that direction.
Yes,
Like for instance, Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Ghana has opened up its doors to us and given us citizenship. You know, dual citizenship if we want it. I'm seeing Ethiopia is another one who's very open and welcoming to the Africa here in America. I just lost my train of thought. Oh, the year of return, which is this year.
That's right.
Yeah, so Ghana, you know, and I'm watching the moves, and I'm watching the movers and the shakers and the leaders in some of the continental lands extending the hand to us here in Africa. So I'm glad you brought that up. What about the term Africa itself? Some believe that that's a European term, that Africa was colonized, and that term Africa is a European, it has the origins in European colonization. Would you agree with that or no?
I disagree. And I know why they say it. They say it because of Scipio Africanus.
Yeah.
And like I said before, some of us repeat what we hear, some of us investigate what we hear, and some of us search for what we need to know. Now there's a lot of talk about Africa, but I'm always going to go with our scholars. I'm always going to go with our great minds on the top of that. So what we do know is this: we do know that in the northwestern region of Africa there was a people that was called the Afri people. That much we do know. And we know also during the time period of the Roman Empire, when Roman was extremely powerful, and it was controlling part of Europe, parts of Asia, and parts of Africa, North Africa for the most part. So we know that at some point the Romans began, as a result of their interaction with the Afri people, began to say Africa or African and things like that. Now, if we're looking for the actual origin of the word, we're looking for the origin is going to go back to those Afri people. Now, I don't need, like I believe as Dr. Winoka Rashidi says, I don't believe that African people, our people, thought in terms of this is a continent. I think the whole idea of a continent is a European thinking for the most part, right? So I'm not saying that our people was on Africa and we named the whole land. Europeans do that. Europeans name everything. They got to dominate and control everything, right? So we're looking for the African people who we know are African people that come from Africa. Now, if the Romans took that name and applied that name to the land, to the mass, so be it. If that's so happened how it went down. But what we know, what I can stand on, and it can be verified, as Dr. John Henry Clark teaches, is that the African people predates the Roman people. It's AFRI.
Okay, Afri.
Oh, okay. Interesting
Northwest?
stuff.
Northwest.
Okay. So whenever I hear people say things like, and I know I'm going back, but I again, I want to play devil's advocate on purpose. But when I hear people say things like, they don't know anyone from Africa, so I don't know nobody there. My roots are here. All my people are here. I don't know no Africans. What would that be essentially cutting off the root of your lineage when you do that?
Yes, it is, but again, like I said, some of us don't know that. So I think our responsibility is to determine if that person is sincere in that ignorance or just ingrained in his or her stupidity.
So what happens when you do that, though?
If it's a person that's ingrained in his or her stupidity, I'll allow them to cut themselves off because you need to die, in my opinion. But if someone is just
For real, will you?
If someone just sincere in their ignorance, then I wanna work with them. I wanna help them come to some type of better understanding of their own thinking, to let them know that mathematically you wouldn't be here without people predating you, who predated those people, who predated those people. And even if you just think about the United States as it is, this place only 200 something years old for the most part, right? So you have to logically know that, you extend back further than 200 something years. So I just help people to think, and it gotta be a place of an origin for you. Now, check out the doc talks about in here. He talks about this thing called the Gloger's rule, right? And in most sciences, like whatever, they are in a consensus around this particular rule, what we call it, the rule of law. And what it says is that animals or human beings or species originating closest to the equator will be darker in pigmentation. Right? So when you look at the map, if you open it up and look at the equator, the United States of America don't fall on the equator at all. It's above the equator, right? So on the basis of that alone, scientifically, right, we know life didn't originate there. It couldn't start there. It could have migrated there, but it didn't originate there, right? So when you look across at the equator, you're going to see Africa, you're going to see Brazil, you see places like, I think, like Colombia. Those are the ones that's on it. You go across Indonesia, places like that are on the equator for the most part. So we know that that's the equator. We know that the pigmentation is the origin of all life. Everything else coming from the pigmentation. So now what you want to do, you want to narrow it down, right? So where is the oldest fossils at? So to give us a point of origin. So the oldest fossils is in Africa. So we know that we're across the equator, the Great Lake regions, Ethiopia and Kenya, right? So this is where we are originating at. African people are coming out of this place right here. And this is what we got to help people to come to understand. And I think if we can present that to people in a simplistic way and show them and walk them through that, I think anyone that's truly in search of truth can come to understand that to be a truth.
No, I have a question. Like when people talk about the migration, like when you hear people talk about like, we were the first, let's say in the Americas, we were the first here. Is that connected somewhat to when they were all connected, I guess what they call Pangea?
Pangea.
Yeah, is that around the time that maybe a lot of that migration took place? I'm just asking.
Scientifically, from my research, during that particular time period that the scientists are identifying as being Pangea, that predates human existence.
Okay.
That predates human existence. During the time period of human existence, what we define as being Pangea wasn't in existence.
Okay.
To that degree.
Thank you for clearing that up.
What about the language that we find ourselves speaking? This English language. Can we become free of colonization using the colonizer's language?
It's a great question. What happens with any group of people is that at some point what is defined and evolved is a dialect, right? So granted, we do speak what they define as being English, but technically we don't speak English, right? Even what we speak in the United States is derivative of English. English is they speak in England, totally spoken, totally different than what we speak. So when you look at us black people, there are words in the language that we use that's not in their quote unquote language for the most part, right? Because we are beginning to develop and evolve our own distinct language. Although it's coming out of this European stuff that we've been colonized here, because realistically speaking, once again, all of us are not going to learn an African language, especially those of us that's up in age. We're just not going to learn it. But you got to think of some of the words that are in the language that we speak that's not European languages that can be traced back to Africa. Now, like a word such as soda, it's not a European word. You know what I'm saying? Regina, you know what I'm saying? Regina is that's Kiswahili. You know what I'm saying? There's tons, and you can go through other words and words that we use that derives out of African languages. There was a group of psychologists back in the late 60s, early 70s, they put a book out called Black Psychology. In this particular book, where it demonstrated the connectivity between the language that we speak in the United States of America, black people, and West African languages. Through their research, they showed that there was a connectivity to that. And although we say what they call English, but we don't say the things they say the way they say things, right?
Yeah.
We don't, even when we go to school and learn their languages and stuff like, or their grammar, we still don't formulate our stuff that way. Because, bingo, they call it slang, right? So you can be, to make you feel less than. They define it because when you define it gives you power. So they have to define what we're doing as something less than so we can feel bad about it, right? But sometimes people might use words like, they might say they is, right? And they say, you shouldn't say they, you should say they are, things of that nature, right?
Yeah.
And we jump on each other because of that, right? But the reason we're saying they is not because we can't put together they are,
Right.
it's because they are doesn't comport with the syntax of our thinking. That's why.
Well, you know,
That's what's going on. It's not. It don't flow for us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When they
I
say
was
don't,
gonna say
when they
that.
say don't end sentences with a preposition,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like they might say, well, you say pick up those shoes, right? We might say pick those shoes up.
Yeah.
They're gonna say pick. The latter is incorrect if we let them tell it,
Mm.
right? Now I'm not saying that we shouldn't know how to use their language when dealing with them. I'm not saying that because someone's gonna jump in quick. I know how we are. We gotta defend white folk, right? We're jumping quick. Well, we need to know their language. We're in their language. We're gonna say all that old foolishness, right? So let me just say that for you up front. I am not saying that you should not know the language of the ethnic group that you're talking to. It makes great sense to know the language of the group that you're talking to. But I am saying is that let's not let the ethnic group define who we are to make us feel bad about what we are doing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Because it's happening organically and naturally. We need to embrace it.
You know, when you just talked about the dialect, I know probably a couple of years ago I was doing some research just about the island that I'm from, and it was just like they had
St.
like,
Thomas.
St. Thomas. I'm sorry, St. Thomas. Yeah, U.S. Virgin Islands. So we are territory.
Mhm.
But I was just looking up a specific dance, but it's actually like it's called the bambula, but it's named after the bambula drum. And so you know you find like the cousins to that dance in Puerto Rico, what they call it bomba, like you know.
Yeah.
So learning the history of that, then I got into the language and the dialect, and there's still so many things that we use in our dialect that is directly connected to the language our ancestors brought to the islands with them. And one example I could think of just speaking is there's this food that we call fungi. Fungi is nothing but cornmeal. Some people cook cornmeal. You have fufu, fungi, fufu, like you see the connection.
That's right.
And so there are so many other words that I could, you know, when you think like, oh, that's just our slang, but it really was, it came from the
That's right.
ancestors. And then also too, when you go to places like, not Dominican Republic, but Dominica, they speak what they call like they say broken French. It's a dialect that they have, even though it's French, it's all like how they say broken English.
Right.
It's like that, and a lot of our ancestors that were in those islands, they created that. It was a survival thing. You know what I mean? So the masters or the oppressors wouldn't understand what they say. But what I found though, Baba Imhotep, is that language, especially in describing certain things, and I use this as an example because my son's father, sometimes he's from Uganda and he's trying to say something and he'll say to me, there's no word in English for it.
That's right.
There's no, like, if I use that, so I'll say, well, this word might fit. And it's like, no, because that word actually dilutes what he's trying to say or waters it down completely.
That's right.
So you see the struggle, because so I really believe like language is not just like expression. I think it's essence. I think there's a lot of things that's connected to language that we kind of look past, and that's why you can have people
That's
say, we should know this, but there's some like African words and the way that they use the hieroglyphics, for example.
Yes.
You know, you go in even to the Chinese culture, for example, you see certain pictures that they use, or this, you're like, why do they use a bird and a stick to say statue?
That's right.
Because each of them means something that combines together, gives you the word stat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's like a deeper level to language that I think most of us as African people kind of dismiss, because again, we've adopted English as our
That's right.
only
Primary
language.
language. Right.
Yeah.
You make a great point, and that's one of the things that Dr. Chicken and Job talk about in this book. He speaks about the linguistic connections, the psychological connection, and the historical connection. He said that those three pillars, those three foundations, when you look at those, he see those are the three things that links us as African people. Because what he was demonstrating was a uniformity and a connectivity throughout the whole the landmass of Africa.
Mhm.
And he was saying that you can see how everything was linked through language and our psychological disposition
Mhm.
and our history. We are one in that respect there. And so you're correct. So some of us, we downplay language because we have went to someone else's school
Mhm.
who don't understand the importance of language and the spiritual significance and the cultural base of language. Language is spiritual and it's cultural,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Culture is transmitted principally through language.
Mhm.
We use language to do that, and within the language there's an essence. That
Mhm.
essence is our spirit.
Yes.
So when you listen to African language and you're paying attention to it, when people are talking, when you learn the language, you can hear it over a certain time period. It becomes very poetic,
Mhm.
right? But that poetic flow, the fluency of it, right? It tells a story in the language. So you can listen to the language and you can see, like it's deeper than just sound.
Mhm.
It's more to it than just sound, right? It's essence, and that's what it's all about. And we got to bring that back because even when you look at us in inside these quote unquote urban cities and things like that, and you listen to the things that we say, right? Whether we sound according to how Europeans say we're supposed to say it or not, if you truly listen to us, you'll hear this fluency, you'll hear this power and this potency, because that's the African in us that's still trying to come through in this thing that we call language. It's still trying to come out because we have those retentions. We have allowed these people in this land to try to stifle and smother that retention that we carry inside of us, but it keeps trying to break out. If you think about rap music when it first came on the scene, that was it. It was coming out then. If you think about spoken word poetry, if you think about jazz, you think about all these forms of sound expressions that we brought, right? You hear African coming through.
Go-go.
That go-go, even go-go, yes. It's there. You know what I'm saying? It's us, it's coming out. It's us, it's who we are.
Is it possible, like even like what they've termed ebonics, for example? Is it possible that it's just innate? It is in our nature to speak, because we're talking about language, to find a language, to even create if we need to, something that suits us, that fits us. Because like you said, I don't necessarily think it's an issue of not being able to say they are versus they is,
Yeah.
you know, but they is just seems a little, it feels more like me.
Uh-huh.
You know what I
And
mean?
we did that with Pig Latin.
Uh-huh.
Back in,
Yeah.
back
Back
in
in-
the
yeah.
Days of enslavement.
Right, but I
Tactile
like
enslavement.
I feel
Bingo.
like
Yeah.
it's almost like nature. It just comes out naturally for us. Like, okay, you know what? I got this. This is English. Y'all say I should be able to speak this proper English. But here's what I'm going to do, and we do that with everything that we touch.
That's right.
That's right.
Right? Everything that we
right.
touch, and it has to be like, are we just these rebellious Africans just running all over the place globally, just making chaos of everything, bastardizing people's languages and stuff like that? Or is it just something that just naturally occurs without us even really trying? It's not even deliberate.
That's
Yeah,
right.
what you said.
It's natural.
Right.
Language largely is impacted by climate, geography, and locality. All those things go into the construction and the evolving of a language. So when you have a people that speaks a particular tongue, and if you move them from their locality, which is going to change the climate, it's going to change the geography and things of that nature, over time, they are going to develop and evolve a mode of communication that suits them. Because where they at? They're going to develop that which suits them, because at the end of the day, we need to understand each other before I'm focused on trying to be understood by my oppressor. I can care less about being understood by my oppressor. I need to know that you and I understand each other. So you and I are going to develop the means that's going to ensure that we understand each other best. And that's what people do for the most part. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And see, the clearer you become in your own centeredness, you can appreciate this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The less clear you are, you don't appreciate
Yeah.
this. Your argument is always in defense of your enemy, right?
Yes, yes.
Case in point, when they did the IQ testing, and I believe Dr. Asa Hilliard was a part of this, but don't quote me on this, but I believe he was a part of this because I know he pushed it real big. So they had two different type of tests created. You had the standardized IQ test, for the most part, that, most African American children didn't score too well on that, right? European children scored very well. But when they took that same test and they wrote that test in the grammatical standards that we traditionally use, what they define as being ebonics, you saw the reverse. Those same children who did poorly done well. The ones who done well done poor. So it wasn't a matter of intelligence. So it was a matter of how we process language. And we don't understand is that we do not process their language well. It doesn't sit well with us. You know what I'm saying? Especially the younger generation. Because the more and more we move forward in this land, the more and more we are sending back rebellious African spirits. And we are rejecting everything about these Europeans. Everything about these Europeans being rejected. We just don't understand it because we're so spiritually misaligned that we can't see the return of the ancestors and the warrior spirit is coming back to us. So we are condemning these warriors, making them feel like they're incapable because we're trying to force them to conform to some Europeans.
You know, it's interesting because when I was sitting, I was rocking the baby to sleep one day and I started singing "Hush Little Baby, Don't Say a Word," right? And by the time I went circle back around again the second time, I started to analyze the lyrics. No, because I was like, no, I will not buy you a Billy Goat. It will never happen. So I'm like, this is an elitist song. This doesn't even fit. So I found myself changing the lyrics to it, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to create. But even like the flashcards we use to teach our children, the books, like it has to be stuff that they can identify with.
Right.
Like I heard a sister in an interview was talking about she created some cards for her students. This is she's on the continent. And she created a thing for her students, and she was saying that a lot of it, she like certain things are not don't grow where they're at. So she's like, these little flashcards, they're talking about apples, and she's like, she had to take things that it made sense to the children. A is for something that they probably see every day.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You're talking about AIDS for something else, and they're like, I don't even really know what that is. That's the first time I ever heard of it.
That's right.
And that's a part of education. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So when you mentioned that, I was just like, yeah, you have to kind of do what makes sense.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
What I found interesting, I watched a documentary a couple of weeks ago about the caves back in Europe, the caves, and they found this woman and her husband went in and to do some research because she said nobody was doing it, and she found 15 different symbols on the caves in Europe versus thousands in Kemet and other places. And I found that interesting how the language, the difference in the how vast the language was in Africa versus in Europe and in the caves of Europe and when they were in them caves. I just wanted to make note of that. But on another note, are we black?
It was black synonymous with African.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's another one of those. Boy, man, the things that we pick at and the things that we argue really doesn't make any sense to me. I don't have a problem with the terminology black. I don't have a problem with using it and saying that we are because I understand it to be synonymous to African people, and I understand that our ancient ancestors in Kemet also identified with that blackness. And I know people use black in terms of a color, but scientifically, black is not a color. It's not a color at all.
The essence.
Black is the essence, the birth color. Right? Even this thing we call light, there couldn't be no light without black.
Yeah.
Right? See, light, there's a material there's a material within darkness, right? That lights need to reflect off to be light.
Right.
There can't be no light without darkness, right? So for us,
Matter.
matter. You know what I'm saying? So for us, so our ancestors were smart, right? They were identifying with the origin, with the essence. But in our little European minds, in allowing Europeans to try to define for us, we have taken on their ideologies as it relates to us, right? So I don't subscribe to that stuff, right? I know what it is and what it means. I know who I am and where I come from, right? So I don't have a problem with us saying black. I don't have a problem with us associating black with our Africanity. I know that at some point that's the transition, but so I need to utilize the word black with a particular person to get them to understand that the relation between black and Africa, and that's what I would do. You know what I'm saying? Because as you evolve and develop in your own understanding, it changes your self-perception. And that's what it's all about, helping people come to a better understanding of who they are so they can change or transform their self-perception. Because once your self-perception change, then you can begin to identify and relate to those who are as you are. Right? Because that's what it's about, identifying and relating to our own kind.
What do you attribute this whole notion of disassociating with Africanness to? What do you attribute it to? And is there should we be working on reconciling that? Because you talked a lot about there are some people who are just deliberately ignorant,
Mhm.
and then there are just people who they really genuinely don't know any
Yes.
better, and perhaps they're open to learning. That's the key, because everyone is not.
Yeah.
But what do you attribute that thinking to? Because you see it's spreading, it's expanding
Yes, it
now
is. Mhm.
in 2019 if you're paying attention. But what do you think that's coming from?
The media, all forms of media, have always shaped public opinion. So the reason why it's spreading and is on the rise is because of this thing we define as being social media. This thing right here that we call social media is the reason why. So now you got people who are not going to purchase a book.
Yeah.
They're not going to look inside a book. They're going to go on Facebook or they're going to go on YouTube and they're going to listen to these idiots tell them stuff, right? And if the idiot is popular, they're going to take that idiot's word. That's what's happening. So that which is popular is where I'm going to lean. You know, see, I'm not going to hear what the person says and say, that's interesting, and then go search for it because it requires you to spend some money to go search, right? A lot of us are too European in our thinking, and we're too miser in terms of our stinginess, right? Even when it comes to ourselves, right? We're not going to spend a penny to enhance our knowledge, right? But we will squander everything, you know what I'm saying, to spend time in foolishness. That's what we're dealing with. So we're dealing with a people who have bought into the misrepresentation of Africa that have been painted for us by our enemy, and then utilizing these minions, I call them minions, that run around on social media, that's what? Propagating this other misinformation as it relates to African people. Anybody that's trying not to associate with the greatest land in the world is a fool. It's a fool, right? So, and I'm like I say, I stand there. If you sincerely don't know, it don't apply to you. So don't get offended. If you sincerely don't know, don't be offended. But if you wholeheartedly want to hold on to something as foolish as saying that we originate in the United States of America, right? Then you're a fool.
This is my last question, Alkema. I promise. I'm trying to remember exactly what I was going to ask. Okay. Oh, so what about? Okay, so we know if you've been to Africa or if you follow news, African news in any form, or you're around African people and you're talking, you're understanding the politics somewhat through those people. And you might have someone that come to the conclusion like, okay, why would I be running to Africa? Because they have their own problems over there.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't I am an American too. Why wouldn't I just stay here and try to figure out myself here? Because they're dealing with their own stuff over there too. What do you say to those people?
Now, I would say, in the respect that a person disregards Africa for what's taking place over here, I would think that's a little bit of they're off in their analysis. Now, I do believe that African people should be doing the work for African people wherever we are at. So if you are in the United States of America, our principal place of work should be there. If you're in Brazil, your work should be there. But with this work that we're doing, we have to pay attention to our ancestors. We have to begin to move towards the redemption of Africa. We can't leave Africa out there because if we're not going there, others are going.
Right.
So, and the longer we stay away, the harder it's going to be for us to reclaim which is ours. Because other folk foreigners are there in Africa, raping and pillaging Africa as we speak.
Right.
So we have to develop the capacity to lend a hand to our brothers and sisters in Africa. We have to do that. And furthermore, because we have been living amongst the oppressed as long as we have, and a lot of us have reaped some benefits from being amongst this oppressor, a lot of us have benefited from being within this capitalistic land. A lot of us are benefiting from the imperialistic schemes of the USA throughout the world. It's our obligation to help our people because a lot of their destruction, we're benefiting from it. We wear the diamonds and the gold. You know, we're benefiting from it. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff. We're benefiting from the destruction of our people. So we're kind of complicit. You know what I'm saying? On some level. So because of that, we have to at some point. We gotta say, you know what, man, because it's a market for the stuff that they're stealing from our brothers and sisters. You know what I'm saying? They are benefiting and we are benefiting. We gotta help. We gotta help.
I'm seeing that we seem to be all over the place in terms of our beliefs and understanding.
Confusion.
Yeah. Has that always been the case, or was this constructed deliberately by masterminds?
It's a great question. It's interesting because Dr. Jacob Carruthers had put this book out, a little small book. I don't think a lot of people read it, but one of the points that he was making is he was tracing the origin of this confusion that you talk about. And so he traced it back to two individuals, and then he got these two schools of thoughts. And what he was saying is that he said you can take it back to Delaney and Frederick Douglass.
Mm-hmm.
He said you can take it back there, and there's a school of thought of individuals that follow along the thinking of Martin Delaney, all the way up until now. And there's a school of thought that comes out the Frederick Douglass line of thinking all up until now. And as those school of thoughts came up, splinters school of thoughts came off of them for the most part, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with. So granted, the further you go back with us in this land, the less confused we are as to who we were. Case in point, if you go back to the time of Prince Hall, right? He knew he was an African. If you go back during that time period, the late 1700s, the early 1800s, they knew there was Africans. Almost every institution they created African. It wasn't as confused as we are today, right? The confusion became greater as we moved further into what they define as being modern times, right? The more we came into this time period that we want to define as being modern, the greater the confusion that we suffer from.
Why?
Because we began to go more into their ways. We began to get more into them. We began to spend more time around them. That's what happened. When we was not so much around them, we were not as confused. We knew who we were. We understood where we was at. We understood the enemy were, right? As things opened up and we began to, quote unquote, make progress as they defined it, we began to lose ourselves.
Assimilation.
That's what
Makes
happened.
all the sense in the world.
Assimilation, yeah.
It's like the further away from Africa you become, the further away from who you are.
That's right. That's what happened. That's where we at.
Wow.
And it's growing.
I know, that was my last question. How much does, because I see a lot of what they've termed respectability politics, which just is pretty much saying, it's not because of this reason, but if only, and I'm going to give an example when people say, well, if these black men would pull up their pants, they would have respect. It's the idea that
Put on a suit.
it's the idea that we can fix racism by fixing ourselves, right? So that's respectability politics. But how much does respectability politics strip us, or the adherence to, or just subscribing to that way of thinking, strip us of our Africanness? Because a lot of our Africanness has been dehumanized and demonized over centuries. And still now, you could still see it. It's a little subtle sometimes when they write certain articles about young people and so forth. You still see the shade. You still see where our boys are looked at as men. All right, for a long time, from the time they're probably 10 years old, okay, probably younger, but they're not the little bodies are not seen as little boys, right? So so when it comes to like Africanness, where people say, well, that's just primitive or uncivilized, how much does respectability politics and us adhering to or following respectability politics as black people, how much does that strip us of our Africanness?
Yeah, actually, I appreciate the question. It strips us in totality. And what I mean by that is any people that subscribe to the ways of another people, you have totally relinquished who you are. And so we allow other people to determine what is respectable and what isn't for us, then we no longer act in our own best interest. So what we have to be able to do is that it's like if you're inside, it's like if I go to a battlefield, and once I get to the battlefield, I see I have 10 enemies. Instantly, I have to fight this fight what's best for me. I can't allow any one of them to tell me how to fight this fight. If I identify 10 enemies, I have to do what's best for me to win in this particular instance. And that's the same thing with concepts and definitions. So we in a war, we got these enemies, whether you're in politics, whether you're in economics, whether you're in the social field or in the medical field, all you are enemies, right? We got to define for us the best way to be, rather than whatever anything any of y'all say, right? And until we are able to do that, we're going to struggle, right? We got to always be able to define what's best for us. How are we to be? And we got to determine that for ourselves. And this is how we begin to move forward.
Okay, and I just have moving forward, speaking of, where do you see us heading based on our current position?
Ooh. I battle with that. I go back and forth so many times, and I like to be honest, and I try to be as vulnerable as possible. Sometimes I feel like we on a good move. I feel like we got a great push that's going. I feel like things are going to happen. I'm telling my team always, man, we living in historic times, boy. It's happening. Doing it, everybody's doing it, highlighting different people, and then just like that, I might go on social media, go somewhere and see something, and I'd be like, boy, we got a long way to go. You know what I'm saying? Like this confusion is serious. But as I reflect now, sitting here, because once upon a time, I wouldn't have had this discussion. Because the way that I feel like it's futile. And I feel like to have the discussion is to give validity to the madness. And I be wanting to stand clear of the madness because I'm so addicted to just doing the work from an authentic, sincere place. But to be honest, knowing that this sister put this new research out, knowing that this sister put this new research out, knowing that this sister put this new research out, these are all black women, black doctors, right? We are doing it. We're on the rise. We are on the rise. We are living in historic times. We're living in some very historic times. And we are making motion. Do we have some challenges? Yes. Do we have some struggles? Yes. But are we making advances? Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Collectively,
Yeah.
when you put it all together collectively, we are making advances. Whatever your struggles are, don't give up and don't quit. We are winning. It doesn't seem like it because we have been conditioned to see big victories.
Yeah.
So we can't see that. You're winning. For someone such as myself to be sitting here, I only went to their 8th grade. Think about that.
And I went to their 9th.
That's it. I went to their 8th grade. They had me inside John Hopkins, an MRI, checking my brain. They told me I couldn't learn anything. But yet I've written 4 books. I produced over 25 DVD lectures. Built an organization. You know, by their standards, they were saying I was uneducated. So we are winning.
Yeah.
Keep doing what we're doing. And this last book right here, The Slave Ship Colita, this research right here demonstrates this ship brought people from Benin and took them down to Alabama, Mobile, Alabama. And the people that's still there today, there's a place called Africa Town. To this very day, it's in Alabama. It's called Africa Town. And if you go talk to them, they can trace themselves back to the Africans that was brought across on that ship. They know their history. No, not those.
This is
Yeah.
okay.
But we doing it. We're making progress.
Yeah, I feel you. I agree with you too. What gives you hope? That's my final question.
What gives me hope? I was just asked that question on my way down here. What gives me hope is the history. That's why I read it so much, to understand it and to live it. It's the history, just to know who we are and where we come from, to know the culture. When I say Njia yet too, to know our way is so different from their way. Our way is collective, their way is individualistic. Our way is multi-parenting, their way is single parenting. Our way is communal, their way is individual. You know, just to know that our way is spiritual, their way is rigid religion. Our way is transcendence, transition, transformation. Their way is finality, the ending. Just to know that we are so different. We had this beautiful concept of life is what gives me hope. Just to know our way is my hope.
Where can they find your
Oh
books?
man, great question. You can find any of my books. The best way to find my books actually is to just contact me on Facebook, and you can do that by putting my name in, Imhotep Fatu, and just contact me directly. Like I said, 4 books out: Urban Philosophy, Thought and Behavior System; Urban Philosophy, Politics of Urban Struggle; Urban Philosophy, New Age Domestic Colonialism; and the last book that I just put out is African Manhood in the 21st Century. So you can find me on Facebook. Just inbox me.
And I know you guys are working. I think there's still time for them to vote if they wanted. You guys,
Yes, we got one more day left.
Grant.
It's a grant. It's $1,000 grant. We're trying to get, and the $1,000 is going to be used to go towards a lot of our community initiatives that we're going to be doing going forward. Right now we are in first place, but we know that can change at any minute. We have one more day left. the voting process, it ends on the 27th, which is tomorrow. So you can vote. You go on Facebook, on in our pages, you'll see the link. All you gotta do is just go on and vote. It's nothing to it. And you can vote every day. So if you vote
Oh, I
today,
didn't know that.
yeah, you vote every day.
Okay, so
So-
it will go on the PLM page,
Yes, you can go there.
Pan-African
The
Liberation Movement.
Yes.
And okay, yeah, Vote Family, help them with this brand. Y'all know you guys do so much in the community up in Baltimore. So
Yes.
thank you. I just saw some videos when you guys were cleaning the community,
Yeah, clean up, yes.
sweeping, and had
Yeah.
the children
Had
out
the
there
children.
cleaning up and stuff.
We
So
got to. So yeah, real quick. The reason we do that, because one of the things we're trying to do anyway, where we at, from my understanding, is I say, NGA our way is communal. So I realized that we'll be greatly effective if we can centralize as a people.
yeah.
It's not easy to do, but it's doable. So currently where we are trying to centralize everybody that's in our organization. So thus far to date, there's about 8 families that have moved on the same block. And so we're gonna transform the block. No, it's not a block that most people, if you got bourgeois ways, you probably wouldn't want to live there. You probably say, I'm not gonna move my children over there, you know what I'm saying? But like I said, that's your value system. But I can live anywhere in the US if I chose to, right? But I'm choosing to live there because
Absolutely.
it's about changing, about doing the work, right? So
Beautiful.
we getting it done.
Well, family, there you have it. From Imhotep Fatiur. This has been the Empower Hour. Tune back in with us. We do this each and every Wednesday. We ask that you subscribe to our channel. You can find all our past episodes on our YouTube channel, which is Miss Free the People. Subscribe to us on Facebook under the Empower Hour Talk Show. And this is what we do, bring you impactful topics of discussion that affect our everyday lives.
That's it.
And that's it, as Hanifa will say. Take care of each other out there. Peace.
Post it. Thanks, Cruz.